The garage door was open. That single detail shattered the fragile calm of my morning. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee cooling in my hands, staring at the hollow rectangle of sunlight spilling into the empty space where Ethan's 1968 Mustang Fastback had slept for years. It wasn't supposed to be open. Ethan never left it open. Even 8 months after the crash that took him from me, I could still hear his voice reminding me to double-check the locks to never trust an open door. My throat tightened. I set the mug down and walked toward the back door slippers silent against the tile. The air outside was unseasonably warm for April, thick with the scent of damp grass and gasoline. When I reached the garage, the silence hit me like a body blow. His tools hung on the pegboard, each one outlined in marker wrench socket screwdriver, every piece in its place. His red toolbox sat closed. A rag still hung over the stool, where he'd wiped his hands. Only the space in the center was wrong. The oil stain that had lived beneath the car for years looked like a wound. The Mustang was gone. 20 years of his life, 10 years of our marriage vanished overnight. I tried to breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way Ethan used to calm me during panic attacks, but the air caught in my chest. My hands shook. I opened the toolbox, half expecting a note, some explanation, but it was just steel and silence. I picked up his work journal from the bench, the one with the grease-stained cover. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before the accident. His handwriting tight, deliberate read, "Final tune-up this weekend. Can't wait to teach Emma to drive her. Next summer we take her down the coast." My name in his script broke something in me. I pressed the journal to my chest, the smell of oil and old leather clinging to my skin like memory. My vision blurred. That car wasn't just metal. It was Ethan's patience, his therapy, his legacy, and now it was gone. The rational part of me whispered theft insurance procedure, but something deeper. The instinct that comes from love and loss said no. This wasn't random. I scanned the workbench again and saw the hook where the spare garage key used to hang. Empty. Someone who knew where it was. Someone who belonged here. My phone buzzed on the counter inside. I walked back, legs, weak heart thudding. One new message. From Alice. My sister. "Don't freak out. It's handled." I stared at the screen, the words refusing to make sense. Handled. I dialed her immediately. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Still nothing. The coffee on the counter had gone cold, a thin skin forming on top. My mind raced. Alice had always been around too much after Ethan's death, hovering, taking over, rearranging my life like I was incapable. She'd called it helping. I'd called it suffocating. She said she understood grief, but her version of understanding meant taking control. The idea hit me slowly, like a shadow creeping across the floor. She had access to the house. She knew the code she'd been talking about Derek's business trip to Paris. No, she wouldn't. Would she? I grabbed my keys and ran out to the driveway, slippers scraping the concrete, adrenaline numbing everything else. The garage looked smaller without the car, emptier, lonelier. The air buzzed with invisible weight. I felt Ethan everywhere, the smell, the order, the ghost of his laugh. But the world had tilted. My sister had crossed a line I hadn't even known existed. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just whispered into the silence. "Ethan, what did she do?" I drove straight to Alice's house, my mind spinning faster than the engine. She lived across town in one of those pretentious, gated communities where everything smelled like money and artificial lavender. The guard waved me through. Of course he did. Alice had probably listed me as family. The sun was too bright, reflecting off her spotless windows off the white Tesla parked crooked in the driveway, the kind of shine that hides rot. I rang the doorbell once. The door opened before the chime faded. Alice stood there in silk pajamas, a glass of green juice in her hand, her expression flat and bored, as if she'd been waiting for me. "Emma," she said too casually. "You look tired. Where's the Mustang?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. Her brows lifted slightly the way they used to when we were kids, and she was about to lie. "Oh, that old thing, I sold it." The words landed like a slap. "You what?" "You heard me. It was just sitting there collecting dust. Derek's been so stressed lately, and I thought a trip might help him decompress." "A trip?" My voice rose. "You sold Ethan's car to fund a vacation." She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. It's not like you ever drove it. You barely even looked at it. He's gone. Emma, you can't keep worshiping a dead man's toy. Her tone was honey over knives. It was worth something. Why let it rot in your garage? I took a step forward, pulse pounding. You had no right. That car was his life. You didn't even ask me, she smirked. Would you have said yes? No. Then what's the difference? It's done. Derek's voice drifted from inside the house. Babe, we're gonna be late if we want to beat the traffic. He appeared behind her wearing designer sunglasses indoors, a man too proud to admit he had nothing of his own. Oh, Emma, he said, smiling that lazy, fake grin. You're up early. Heard you're still clinging to that car. Glad we could help move things along. Move things along, I repeated, incredulous. You think this is helping? Alice placed a manicured hand on his chest, the picture of control. Emma, you need to stop obsessing over things. Ethan's gone. You're young. You should be dating traveling living, not crying over engines and ghosts. The way she said his name, Ethan, like it was a tool. My stomach twisted. How much did you sell it for? I demanded. She sipped her juice. 15,000. I actually laughed, a hollow sound that didn't feel like me. 15. That car's worth 6 times that. You conned yourself. No, sweetie, she said softly, mockingly. I freed you. It's called closure. The words burned more than her betrayal. Closure to Alice always meant control. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You should thank me. You're stuck. I'm trying to help you move forward. By stealing from me, by saving you from yourself, she said smoothly. Derek chuckled, rubbing her shoulder. We'll send you pictures from Paris. Maybe pick up a souvenir Mustang keychain. My hand twitched. For one wild second, I imagined throwing my coffee in his smug face, but I didn't move. I just stared at them, perfect couple, perfect poison. You're unbelievable, I whispered. Alice tilted her head, eyes gleaming. You always say that, but I always end up being right. That's when something in me shifted, quiet but final, like a door closing. I turned without another word, walked down her immaculate path lined with trimmed roses that smelled like nothing. The sunlight made everything too sharp, too unreal. Behind me, I heard Derek laugh again. See, babe, she'll get over it. And Alice's reply, soft and smug. She always does. My car door slammed louder than I meant it to. I gripped the steering wheel until my fingers hurt. The tears didn't come. They were buried under something colder clarity. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd erased it. My phone buzzed as I drove off. A text from Alice, one line that felt like a warning more than comfort. You'll thank me later. I didn't reply. I drove until the houses turned to trees and the anger had space to breathe. Then I whispered to the empty seat beside me, to the ghost of Ethan, I won't let her win. The drive home blurred into gray. When I parked, the silence of the house swallowed me whole. The walls felt too clean, too still, as if even the air refused to touch me. I sat at the kitchen table, Ethan's mug still sitting there, the one with the chipped handle and the faded World's Best Husband print. I wrapped my fingers around it even though it was empty. It grounded me like he was still here, whispering from some unseen corner. Breathe. Emma, just breathe. But I couldn't. I dialed my mother's number, hoping for outrage, for something human. Mom Alice sold Ethan's car, without asking. Emma, she interrupted, that familiar tired sigh slicing through me. You need to let it go. Alice told me you're spiraling again. Sweetheart, I know how hard grief can be, but you can't make everything about Ethan. I froze. She told you what? That you've been unstable, not sleeping, not eating right. She's worried about you. I laughed, a sharp sound that startled even me. She's worried about me. She's the one who stole from me. She didn't steal Emma. She said she handled it because you couldn't. You should be grateful. Grateful. That word again. I stared at the phone like it might bite me. Mom, she's lying. She and Derek took advantage of enough. Her voice cracked like a whip. You always think the worst of her. She's successful, Emma. She's doing her best to help you. You should take a page out of her book instead of clinging to the past. The line went dead before I could speak. I sat there listening to the faint hum of the fridge and realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. Mom had always chosen Alice, ever since we were kids. When Dad was drunk and shouting, Alice would hide his bottle and tell him Emma broke it. When I tried to speak up, Mom would scold me for provoking your sister. Alice learned early that control was safety. I learned silence, and silence became survival. I thought Ethan had broken that pattern. He'd made me believe I could be seen, that love didn't have to hurt. He'd built that car piece by piece like a promise patience care detail, everything my childhood never had. And now my sister had ripped it away like she was tearing out his memory by the roots. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Alice. I hope you're not upsetting Mom. She doesn't need this drama. A second later, you've always been too emotional. Try to rest. I put the phone down, hands trembling. Gaslighting in its purest form. The way she turned her cruelty into concern. The way she made me doubt my own mind. That was her gift. She never needed to shout. She could destroy you in a whisper. I went to the garage again, drawn there like a wound drawn to salt. The empty space was unbearable. I traced my fingers over the oil stain. My reflection in the tool cabinet looked foreign hair. Messy, eyes red but hard, no longer soft. Something darker sat behind them. Ethan's journal lay open where I'd left it. I turned to the next page and saw a note written in the margin I hadn't noticed before. If anything ever happens to me, ask Tom Graves. My pulse jumped. The name meant nothing then, but it would soon. I closed the journal, held it tight against my chest, and looked around at the garage one last time. I whispered, "You planned for this, didn't you?" A gust of wind rattled the door as if answering. I went back inside and poured the cold coffee down the sink. I felt hollow, but inside that hollowness was a spark, the smallest ember of defiance. I texted Alice one line. You didn't just sell a car. You started something you can't stop. Then I turned off my phone, locked the door, and let the silence settle like armor. The grief was still there, sharp and raw, but beneath it something new had begun to move. Not rage, not revenge. Resolve. The next morning I woke before dawn, the house still dark, the air heavy with that strange tension before something breaks. I hadn't slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant car passing outside, felt like it belonged to Ethan's Mustang coming home. But it didn't. Instead, the phone rang at 6:42 a.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hello, Mrs. Crawford." A man's voice, gravelly, older, uncertain. "This is Tom Graves from Graves Classic Auto down in Tacoma. I believe I have your husband's car." My grip on the phone tightened. "What did you just say?" "Your sister brought it in 2 days ago. Said she was authorized to sell it, but there's something she didn't know, something your husband told me before he passed." I went completely still. "You knew Ethan?" The man's tone softened. "I did. He helped me once years ago. I owed him more than I could ever repay. And when he restored that Mustang, he told me if anything ever happened, I'd know what to do. He left something for you, Mrs. Crawford. You need to come right away." I sat there, gripping the edge of the counter, the floor tilting beneath me. "Please," he said, voice breaking a little. "I think your husband knew what was coming." The call ended with an address and directions. I barely remembered dressing jeans, sweater, Ethan's leather jacket that still smelled like him. The drive down to Tacoma cut through gray morning mist. I watched the road unwind in front of me like a film I wasn't part of. At every stoplight, I replayed Tom's words. He knew what was coming. What did that mean? At the edge of town, I saw the sign, Graves Classic Auto, Vintage Restoration and Sales. The lot was lined with gleaming old cars, each one a ghost of some man's youth. Tom waited outside the bay doors, tall, gray-haired, tired eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He didn't shake my hand, just nodded. "Thank you for coming, Emma." My name sounded strange in his voice. He led me into the workshop, the smell of metal and oil and dust wrapping around me like memory. And there it was, Ethan's Mustang. Burgundy paint, flawless under the fluorescent light's chrome, shining like it had been polished yesterday. My knees almost gave out. I reached for the hood, touched the cool metal, and for a moment, it felt like touching Ethan's hand. "She's beautiful," Tom murmured. He loved this car. He called it his heartbeat. I whispered, Tom looked at me for a long second. He told me something 2 years ago, said if anything ever happened to him, there was a compartment he wanted me to show you. Said only you should see what's inside. My throat tightened. A compartment, hidden behind the radio. He reached inside, pressed something near the dash, and the radio face loosened with a soft click. Behind it, a hollow space. He stepped back. He told me never to open it. Said it was for you and only you. I reached in, fingers trembling, and pulled out a small sealed envelope with my name written in Ethan's handwriting. Beneath it, a USB drive and a small brass key tied with red thread. My vision blurred. The envelope was thick, heavy. I looked at Tom, voice shaking. Why did he tell you? His eyes glistened. Because he trusted you more than anyone, and because he didn't trust everyone else. For a heartbeat, the world stopped spinning. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, the smell of oil and dust and truth filling the room. I held the envelope close to my chest, and for the first time since Ethan's death, I wasn't numb. I was awake. I sat in my car outside the dealership for nearly 10 minutes before I could bring myself to open the envelope. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ethan's handwriting stared back at me, steady, deliberate, the way he wrote when he was trying to protect me from something. The first line made my stomach drop. Emma, if you're reading this, I didn't trust Alice. Not anymore. I read it again out loud this time, as if hearing his voice could make it less real. The letter continued. I found something about Derek. Fraud, hidden accounts, stolen identities. And Alice is part of it. She's using him. I've gathered everything I could, but if anything happens to me, go to Tom. He'll know where to find this note. My heart thudded so hard, I thought the whole car could hear it. My sister, my own blood, had been tied to Derek's mess for months, maybe years. I took out the USB drive, plugged it into my laptop, and waited as the files loaded. A folder popped open labeled Project Polaris. Inside were screenshots of emails, account transfers, video recordings. The first clip played automatically, Ethan's voice on a call. If you keep moving client funds like this, Derek, someone's going to notice. Then Derek's low, mocking laugh. Relax, Ethan. Nobody looks twice at a dead man's investments. There was a crash, a sound of glass breaking, and then silence. The timestamp was 5 days before Ethan's accident. I froze. My pulse roared in my ears. Ethan had been investigating Derek for fraud, and now he was dead. I clicked through the next set of files. Invoices addressed to shell companies. Wire transfers in Alice's name, her personal email attached. I leaned back in my seat, shaking my head. It couldn't be true. But it was all there in Ethan's meticulous folders, every date, every number. He'd documented everything. He must have known they'd come after him. My eyes caught a final note at the bottom of the letter. Don't go to the police until you have proof they can't bury. They'll make you look unstable. They'll say you're grieving. You need help, not justice. Don't let them win. He knew. Ethan had seen the way Alice operated, how she twisted everything to make me doubt myself. He knew she'd use that against me. My chest ached so hard I had to press my palm against it. I wanted to scream to break something to bring him back, just long enough to ask how to survive this. Instead, I whispered, You didn't die for nothing, Ethan. I swear you didn't. A knock on the window made me jump. It was Tom standing there with 2 coffees in hand. He handed one through the open window. You okay? I nodded, but my voice was a whisper. He knew everything. He left proof. Tom studied my face, jaw tight. Then he also knew who he was fighting. And why. He glanced toward the USB drive still glowing in the laptop port. He told me something else once. Said his sister-in-law reminded him of someone he used to work for, a woman who smiled like she was always 3 moves ahead. I swallowed hard. She is. She's been manipulating our family for years. Tom sighed, looked toward the bay where the Mustang sat gleaming under white light. Then maybe it's time she learned what happens when someone underestimates Ethan Crawford. His words steadied me more than he knew. I closed the laptop and tucked the letter and USB back into my bag. The brass key glinted in my palm, engraved with a number 417. I turned it over, confused. What's this for? Maybe the next step, Tom said quietly. He told me once that if you ever came for that envelope, you'd find what he couldn't finish. I looked at the key at the Mustang at the letter in my lap. The fear didn't disappear, but something stronger replaced it purpose. Then I'll finish it for him, I said. Tom nodded once, solemn. Good, because I have a feeling Alice won't stop until you do. The brass key wouldn't leave my mind the entire drive home. 417. I turned it over in my hand like it was a question that might answer itself. Ethan had always been deliberate, never left things to chance. Every screw in his Mustang had a purpose. So did this key. The number looked stamped, not engraved, like something from a bank or storage vault. That night, I pulled out his old file cabinet, years of paperwork warranties and handwritten notes. My fingers found a faded envelope labeled First National Bank, Safety Deposit Access. My pulse jumped. The same bank where he'd taken me once years ago when we refinanced the house. He'd joked then, "One day you'll know where everything is, just in case I get hit by a bus." I had laughed. I wasn't laughing now. The next morning, I was waiting at the bank door before it opened. The manager, a kind woman named Rebecca, recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Crawford, I'm so sorry about Ethan. He was one of our favorites." I nodded, holding the key out. "He left me this. I think it's for a safe deposit box." Her brows lifted. "Of course. Let's check." 10 minutes later, we stood inside the cool, sterile vault. The metallic smell mixed with air conditioning and old paper. Rebecca located box 417, inserted her master key beside mine, and turned. "I'll give you privacy," she said softly. Inside was a single manila folder, thick and sealed. My hands shook as I lifted it out. The label read, Vanessa Cortland, Legal Private, the same name from Ethan's investigation files. I slid it open and froze. Inside were photos. My sister Alice arm in arm with Derek, and another man. Different city, different year. Then another photo. Alice with the same man, this time at a courthouse, both holding marriage documents. The date, 2018. That couldn't be right. She and Derek married in 2020. There were more. Copies of IDs, bank transfers, marriage certificates. Alice under different last names. Crawford, Mitchell, Cortland. Each tied to a different man, each man older, wealthier, all with families that mysteriously lost assets afterward. I flipped through until I reached a note in Ethan's handwriting. She's done this before. 4 men, each one drained dry. Each one with a grieving widow or broken child left behind. Derek's next. Emma could be next. My knees went weak. The room tilted. I had to grip the edge of the table to stay upright. My sister wasn't just manipulative, she was predatory. She'd been conning her way through lives for years, and now she was trying to erase Ethan's memory for profit. I found one last document at the bottom, a notarized letter dated 3 months before Ethan's death. In the event of my passing, the attached file should be delivered to attorney Marcus Shaw, Seattle, to be opened only if Emma Crawford is in danger of financial coercion or fraud from Alice Mitchell or associated parties. I whispered the name like a prayer. Marcus Shaw. That was the next step. I replaced everything, carefully locked the box, and left the vault on shaking legs. Outside, the world was too bright, too normal. Parents walked kids to school. A man sold coffee at the corner cart. None of them knew that 2 miles away, a woman had just learned her sister might be a criminal. I drove to a quiet park and sat under a tree reading Ethan's letter again. He had known everything, every betrayal, every lie, and he'd built a map for me to follow. He'd turned his death into a trail of justice. When I finally started the car, my hands no longer trembled. I wasn't a grieving widow anymore. I was a woman with evidence, purpose, and a target. Alice had stolen my husband's car. I was about to take her entire life apart. Marcus Shaw's office sat high above downtown Seattle, glass and marble and silence. I could see my reflection in the elevator doors, pale, tired, but steady. I clutched Ethan's folder so tightly my knuckles turned white. The receptionist recognized his name immediately. "Mr. Shaw asked that you be brought in as soon as you arrived." She led me down a long hallway lined with framed certificates. My footsteps echoed like small heartbeats. Marcus Shaw was in his 60s, tall and careful in movement, the kind of man who measured words like medicine. "Mrs. Crawford," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Ethan told me you'd come one day." My throat closed up. "He told you?" He nodded. He was cautious. He came to me last year with suspicions about your sister and her husband, asked me to help prepare a protection file for you in case something happened. He gestured to a chair. I sat the envelope trembling in my lap. He said you might bring this. I handed him the folder. He slipped on reading glasses, scanned the pages, slowly expression tightening. My God, he murmured. He was right to be afraid. What is it exactly? I asked, voice shaking. Your sister's legal history, or rather the fragments of it she tried to bury. He laid out the documents across his desk. Alice Mitchell, formerly Alice Harding, formerly Alice Cortland. Multiple marriage records, falsified tax IDs, and corporate filings under assumed names. This isn't just fraud, it's calculated identity theft. And your brother-in-law, Derek, he's her latest partner. Together, they've moved assets through shell companies laundering money through classic car sales and investment fronts. I swallowed hard. You're saying she killed Ethan for money? Marcus looked up sharply. I can't prove that, but I can tell you this, his death was extremely convenient. The week after his accident, 2 of his investment accounts were quietly transferred to an offshore trust connected to Derek's firm. That's not coincidence, Emma. I stared at him, the room spinning slowly. Ethan hadn't just left me clues, he'd left a case file. Can we take this to the police? Marcus exhaled. We can, but you'll need ironclad proof. If we file too early, she'll spin it. She's good at that, isn't she? She makes people believe I'm unstable, I whispered. He nodded. Exactly. You need to stay quiet, play the grieving widow, let her think she's won. Meanwhile, we gather evidence she can't erase. I leaned forward. What kind of evidence? Marcus reached into a drawer, pulling out a flash drive. Ethan gave me this before he died. He said it was encrypted, told me never to open it until you came. He said you'd know when. My hands shook as I plugged it into his computer. A password prompt appeared. Beneath it, a single note. Emma used the date of our first drive. I smiled faintly through the ache. July 14th. I typed it in. The drive unlocked. Dozens of documents flooded the screen, contracts, wire transfers, surveillance photos. Marcus scrolled through them, eyes widening. This is more than enough to start an investigation. And this? He opened a folder labeled Video Evidence. Inside were short clips from Ethan's home office security camera dated just days before his death. The footage showed Derek in their garage, Ethan's garage, rifling through toolboxes, checking drawers. At one point, he picked up Ethan's keys, turned toward the camera, and smirked. Marcus froze the frame. That's premeditation. He was searching for something. The USB, I whispered. He must have been looking for it. Marcus sat back thinking. We'll take this to the authorities, but first, I need you to understand if Alice realizes you know she'll retaliate. People like her don't go quietly. I thought of her smug face, her silk pajamas, the way she'd said you should thank me. Good, I said quietly. Let her try. Marcus studied me for a long moment, then smiled slightly. Ethan would be proud. You're sharper than she realizes. I stood gripping the flash drive like a weapon. What do we do first? He opened his planner. You'll get a call tomorrow from Detective Ramirez. He's handled white-collar fraud for 30 years. Don't mention Alice yet. Just tell him about the car sale. Let me handle the rest. As I left the office, Seattle's rain began to fall, streaking the glass elevator walls. For the first time since Ethan's death, I felt it wasn't over. The fight had just begun. The next day, the world pretended to be normal. The sun broke through the Seattle fog, children biked past my porch, and I sat at the kitchen table rehearsing what to say to Detective Ramirez when he called. Marcus's voice still echoed in my head. Don't let her know you're on to her. But it was too late for that. Alice always knew. At 10:04 a.m., my phone buzzed. Her name lit the screen. I almost didn't answer, but silence would be worse. Hey, Em, she said, syrup sweet. Mom told me you've been acting strange. Everything okay? I could hear traffic behind her, or maybe wind from an open window. Paris, probably. You sound off, she added. I forced calm into my voice. I'm fine, just busy. You sure? Because Derek and I got a weird call from the dealership, something about the Mustang being held for review. My throat went dry, so Tom hadn't stayed quiet. I don't know what you're talking about. Alice laughed soft and cruel. Oh, come on. You really think you can play Detective Emma? That car was dead weight. I did you a favor. The way she said favor made my skin crawl. I didn't reply and the silence stretched. Then her tone sharpened that edge I'd known since childhood. You've always had this self-righteous streak, acting like the world owes you because your husband died. You're not special, Em. You're pathetic. I swallowed hard. Why are you doing this? I'm not doing anything. You're the one making a scene. If you keep pushing, these people are going to start asking questions about your mental health again. You remember what happened after the accident, right? When you forgot to eat for days, when Mom had to come stay with you. She lowered her voice, twisting the knife. I could tell them you're not stable, that you're fixating again, maybe even dangerous to yourself. Do you really want that kind of attention? My hand clenched around the phone. I could almost see her smiling as she said it. That was Alice's specialty, gaslighting, erasing your sense of reality until you doubted your own breath. You sold stolen property, I said quietly. You forged my signature. Her voice went cold. Prove it. Then she hung up. I sat there staring at the phone until it went black. My pulse pounded in my ears. She was escalating cornered animals always do. But this wasn't just self-preservation. This was control. She wanted me scared. She wanted me small. That afternoon, I found the first sign that she wasn't bluffing. A man in a dark sedan parked across from my driveway engine idling for nearly an hour. When I stepped outside, he drove away slowly, deliberately. I called Marcus immediately. She's watching me. Stay calm, he said. This means she's nervous. We have her attention. Don't confront her again. Let us tighten the net. By nightfall, the fear turned into something sharper resolve. I printed copies of Ethan's files, hid them in 3 separate envelopes, one in the freezer, one taped beneath the sink, one at the bottom of the laundry basket. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. At 9:17 p.m., my mother called. Her voice trembled. Emma, honey, Alice says you're accusing her of terrible things. Please stop this nonsense before someone gets hurt. Mom, I said, trying to stay calm. She stole from me. Ethan left evidence. I have it. She told me you've been imagining things. She said you're not well. I felt the breath leave my lungs. Do you believe her? There was a pause, long, suffocating. I don't know what to believe anymore. The words broke something inside me. She hung up before I could answer. I stood alone in the kitchen, the sound of rain ticking against the windows. For a long time I didn't move. Then I picked up Ethan's old journal from the counter. On the back page in fading ink he'd written, "Truth is like oil. You can bury it, but it always rises." I closed the book and whispered to the empty room, then let it rise. That night I slept with the lights on, not out of fear, but anticipation. Alice wanted me quiet. She wanted me broken. But she'd just made me unstoppable. Detective Ramirez called the next morning just after sunrise. His voice was calm but firm, the kind that makes people tell the truth without realizing they are. Mrs. Crawford, I've been briefed by Mr. Shaw. I'd like to meet you to discuss your husband's vehicle and the sale. I agreed immediately. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, the kind of place Ethan used to love: black coffee, no music, no noise. Ramirez looked mid-50s, salt and pepper hair eyes that missed nothing. He opened his notepad as soon as we sat down. You said your sister sold your late husband's car without permission. I need to know exactly how that happened. I told him everything. The open garage door, the missing Mustang. Alice's smirk, her words. You should thank me. Ramirez took notes in neat, compact handwriting. When I finished, he leaned back. You're not crazy, Mrs. Crawford. I've seen this kind of thing before: familial coercion, asset theft, emotional manipulation. It's harder to prove when it's blood, but not impossible. He glanced at the flash drive I'd brought. Is that what Mr. Shaw mentioned? I nodded and slid it across the table. Ethan recorded everything before he died. Ramirez connected it to his tablet, watched the same clip of Derek in the garage, the smirk under the security light. His jaw tightened. This was taken days before the accident. Yes, he exhaled slowly. Then this isn't just theft. It might be connected to your husband's death. The words made my stomach turn. I think they benefited, and that's motive enough. He tapped his pen on the table. But we need more. If Alice and Derek are moving stolen assets through dealerships, there's a pattern. The sale of the Mustang could be the thread that unravels the rest. I nodded, gripping my coffee so hard the paper cup bent. What do you need from me? He smiled faintly. To let them hang themselves. You said your sister's in Paris? She was. She's back this weekend. Good. When she gets back, she'll want to make sure you're quiet. I want you to let her think she's winning. Invite her over. Tell her you've been thinking that maybe she was right to sell the car. I'll wire the house for sound. Let her talk. The idea of her voice in my home again made my chest tighten, but I nodded. I can do it. Ramirez's eyes softened. You're stronger than you realize, Mrs. Crawford. Most people in your position collapse. You're building a case. By the time I left the cafe, the rain had stopped. I drove home with the window cracked, letting the cold air sting my face. It made me feel awake, alive. Ethan had started this. I would finish it. 2 days later, the trap was set. Ramirez's team arrived early disguised as electricians. They installed miniature microphones in the kitchen light fixture, one in the living room air vent, another under the edge of the dining table. I signed the consent papers with a trembling hand. You'll be in the van outside. He nodded. We'll hear everything. Just keep her talking. She'll brag, they always do. When Alice arrived that afternoon, she looked radiant, expensive. Her tan from Paris still fresh, her jewelry gleaming. Oh, Em, she said, stepping inside like she owned the place. You look so much better. I was worried. Come in, I said, forcing a smile. I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe you were right. Her eyebrows lifted in delight. About what? Letting go. She smiled, sitting at the table where Ramirez's recorder blinked silently. Finally. You're learning. We talked for half an hour, or rather, she talked, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Then the cracks began to show. You know Derek was hesitant to sell the car, she said, swirling her wine. But I convinced him, told him it was the only way to make the Paris trip happen. We both deserved it after dealing with your mess. My mess, I repeated. She shrugged. Your grief, your mood swings, your finances. You're lucky we helped. Ethan didn't leave you much, did he? I froze. What do you mean? Oh, come on! Her laugh was light but sharp. He told Derek about the offshore accounts, said he was investing. You really didn't know. That was it, the confession Ramirez had needed. My heart hammered so loudly I was afraid she'd hear it. I played dumb. Offshore accounts. Relax, Em. It's not illegal if no one finds out. Then she laughed again, cold self-satisfied. Outside, I saw the faint reflection of movement, the surveillance van parked by the curb. I smiled for the first time in months. You're right, Alice. No one will find out. She raised her glass, thinking she'd won. But the microphones had caught everything. Alice was still sipping her wine when the knock came at the door. Sharp. Measured. 2 beats. 1 pause. Then another. Her smile faltered. Expecting someone, she asked, tone suddenly cautious. I shook my head, walking to the door as calmly as I could, while my pulse thundered. Detective Ramirez stood on the porch, badge in hand, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. He gave me a barely perceptible nod, the signal. Mrs. Crawford, he said loud enough for Alice to hear, we'd like to ask a few follow-up questions about the stolen property. Alice laughed, the brittle, high-pitched kind that came when she felt cornered. Stolen property. Oh, please. Is this another one of Emma's delusions? She's been fragile since her husband died. Ramirez stepped inside without waiting for permission. Ma'am, we have a recording from this afternoon. You confirmed the sale of a vehicle you did not own and referenced offshore accounts linked to your husband's company. Do you want to clarify those statements? Her eyes widened, darting to me, then back to him. You recorded me. I didn't answer. I just stood by the kitchen table, hands steady on the chair back. You can't do that! She shouted, voice trembling now. That's illegal! Ramirez's tone didn't change. Actually, Mrs. Mitchell, or should I say, Mrs. Cortland Washington state law allows a property owner to record conversations in their home if consent is given by one party. That would be your sister. The color drained from Alice's face. For a long, suffocating moment, no one spoke. Then, her mask cracked. You think you can take me down, Emma, she hissed. After everything I've done for this family, done, I said softly. You mean stolen, manipulated, lied. Her voice turned venomous. You've always been jealous, even as kids. You couldn't stand that I was smarter, prettier, that Mom trusted me. I wasn't jealous, I said. I was terrified. Ramirez motioned to one of the officers who produced a folder. Mrs. Mitchell, you are under investigation for grand theft, wire fraud, and identity falsification. We'll need you to come with us. Alice laughed again, but it cracked this time like glass under pressure. You have nothing. Ramirez opened the folder. We have everything. Ethan Crawford's recordings, financial transfers traced from your Shell accounts, and a statement from Tom Graves confirming the sale was fraudulent. You also forged your sister's signature. That's federal. She took a step back, her heel catching on the rug. For the first time, she looked small, desperate. "Derek will fix this," she whispered. Ramirez's brow lifted. "You might want to check the news before you count on that." He gestured toward my television. One of his officers turned it on, flipping to the local channel. Their live-on screen was Derek being led from his office in handcuffs. Head down, surrounded by agents. The caption read, "Financial advisor arrested in multi-state fraud investigation." Alice's breath hitched. "No, no," he promised. I felt something shift inside me. Not joy, exactly. Something heavier. Justice wrapped in exhaustion. "You should have stopped when you sold the car," I said quietly. "That was your mistake. You thought you could rewrite Ethan's life like you rewrote everyone else's." She turned on me, then eyes wild tears smudging her mascara. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing without him." "I know," I said, and I'm still standing. Ramirez stepped forward, voice flat. "Alice Mitchell, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." She lunged at me before he finished her nails, catching my arm, a feral sound ripping from her throat. The officers grabbed her, instantly pulling her back. "You'll regret this," she screamed. "You'll lose everything." "I already did," I said. "Now it's your turn." They dragged her out, still fighting, still shouting my name like a curse. The door closed behind them. Silence flooded the room. I sank into the chair, every muscle trembling. Ramirez placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "It's over." But I knew better. It wasn't over, not yet. The wounds she'd left went deeper than money or lies. They were the kind that rewrote families. Still, for the first time in months, the house felt lighter. Outside, the sky was turning gold. Ethan's Mustang sat quietly in the driveway, gleaming in the last light of day. I whispered to the empty air, "We did it, love. We finally did it." 3 months later, I sat in the courthouse where the walls smelled faintly of coffee fear and old paper. The state had built a case so solid even Alice's high-priced lawyer couldn't untangle it. She'd been charged with fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to launder stolen assets. Derek, her husband, faced a matching list, his plea deal contingent on testimony. When they brought her in, she looked thinner, smaller, but the arrogance remained. Her eyes found mine across the courtroom, still daring me to flinch. I didn't. Detective Ramirez nodded from the prosecution table. His file thick with the evidence Ethan had left behind, the recordings, the forged signatures, the hidden accounts, even Derek's own emails detailing asset liquidation through family access. Ethan's name was on every page, the ghost who had built the foundation of justice long before he died. The prosecutor called me first. I stood, palms slick against the rail, the weight of every sleepless night sitting behind my ribs. "Mrs. Crawford," he began, "can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" "She's my sister," I said. "She was." He nodded gently. "And did you give her permission to sell your late husband's car?" "No." My voice steadied. "She broke into my home, sold it without consent, and used the money for personal travel." The defense attorney objected, tone sharp, smile tighter. "Speculation about motive." The judge waved him down. Overruled, continue. I told them everything. The missing car, the fake concern, the threats, the gaslighting that made me doubt my own sanity. The letter Ethan left. When I reached the part about the secret compartment, the courtroom went utterly silent. Even the shuffling of papers stopped. Then came the video Derek in the garage, rifling through Ethan's things, saying, "Nobody looks twice at a dead man's investments." It played across the big monitor, his voice echoing through the courtroom like poison. Alice didn't look away. She just crossed her arms, jaw tight, like a woman pretending not to feel her own noose tightening. When Derek took the stand next, he looked wrecked. His arrogance had melted into gray-faced exhaustion. "We thought we could make it back before anyone noticed," he said quietly. Alice said the sister would cave. She always caves. "Did she ever mention Ethan Crawford?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes." Derek's throat bobbed. "She said he was getting suspicious, said if he didn't stop asking questions, she'd handle it." A ripple moved through the room, a collective intake of breath. The prosecutor leaned in. "Did she specify how?" Derek's hands twisted in his lap. "She said accidents happen." I closed my eyes. Every sound in the courtroom dissolved into a dull roar. When I opened them again, Ramirez was watching me, a steady anchor in the storm. By the time the evidence presentation ended, Alice's composure had cracked. She shouted over her lawyer, denied everything, accused me of forging the recordings. The judge's gavel slammed down. Enough, Mrs. Mitchell. It took 3 days for the jury to deliberate. On the morning of the verdict, I came early, sat in the same seat I'd occupied since the beginning. My mother sat 2 rows behind me, pale and silent. She hadn't spoken to me since the arrest until that morning when she leaned forward and whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have believed you." I nodded but didn't look back. When the jury filed in, the air went still. The forewoman stood. On the charge of grand theft, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of wire fraud, guilty. On the charge of identity theft and conspiracy, guilty. Alice didn't blink. She just stared at me, eyes blazing with something between hate and disbelief, as if she couldn't fathom a world where she didn't win. The judge's voice cut through the silence. "Mrs. Mitchell, for your crimes and the emotional, financial, and psychological harm inflicted, this court sentences you to 15 years in state prison without parole." Gasps rippled. Alice went rigid, then laughed a hollow, brittle sound. "You think you've won, Em? You think this makes you free?" I met her gaze evenly. "No, Alice. It makes me whole." They led her away in cuffs. Her laughter faded down the hallway, replaced by the sound of camera shutters and murmured headlines. Outside, the courthouse steps gleamed with rain. Reporters shouted questions, but I just kept walking. The sky above Seattle cracked open into sunlight, rare, sharp cleansing. I lifted my face toward it and whispered, "It's over, Ethan. We finished it." For the first time in a year, I believed it. The house was quiet again. Not the oppressive haunted silence from the months after Ethan died. This was different. This was peace. The air no longer felt heavy with unsaid words. The walls didn't echo with Alice's voice or my own fear. It was just still. 3 weeks after the sentencing, I found myself in the garage, the morning sun streaming through the windows, lighting up every speck of dust in the air. Ethan's Mustang sat in its place, the heartbeat of everything we'd survived. I traced my hand along its hood, cool and smooth, the same spot where Ethan used to rest his coffee while working. Detective Ramirez stopped by that afternoon, his coat dusted with rain, a tired smile on his face. "You holding up?" he asked. "I think so," I said. "It's strange. I keep expecting the phone to ring for someone to tell me there's another lie waiting." He nodded knowingly. "That's normal. People like your sister leave cracks. Takes time to stop listening for the next break." I poured him coffee. Ethan's old mug washed but still faintly stained, and we sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Alice had once lied so effortlessly. "You know," he said, "I've worked a lot of cases. Fraud. Family betrayal. But the way you handled this, the way you stayed calm, collected evidence, didn't fold. You gave us a case that will train younger detectives for years." I smiled faintly. I didn't feel calm. Half the time I thought I'd fall apart. He grinned. "That's what courage looks like from the inside." When he left, I walked to the front porch and stood under the gray sky. Across the street, the house where the black sedan used to park sat empty now. No more shadows watching. No more ghosts. Inside, I opened Ethan's journal one last time. The final entry had faded, written in the soft, deliberate handwriting that had once built engines and fixed everything broken. "If love means protecting someone, then mine will outlive me." I closed the book gently and whispered, "It did, Ethan. It did." Weeks turned into months. The story spread the Crawford car case, the papers called it. People stopped me in the grocery store, their voices soft, respectful. "You're the woman who caught her sister, the one who stood up." I never corrected them, because that wasn't really what I'd done. I hadn't stood up, I'd finally stopped kneeling. By spring, I'd started volunteering at the hospital again, not in the trauma ward like before, but in the family outreach program helping people recognize financial and emotional abuse. Some of them were older women like me, some young, some trembling when they spoke about relatives who'd taken advantage of them. Every story echoed mine in some way. Trust turned into currency, love weaponized for control. I told them the same thing every time. You can't save someone who uses love as leverage. You can only save yourself. The healing came slowly in ordinary ways, in the smell of coffee, in the sound of the engine when I started the Mustang for the first time in months. I drove it down the same road Ethan used to take on Sunday mornings, the wind loud, the air sharp with freedom. The world outside moved forward, people walking dogs, kids on bicycles, the city pulsing with new beginnings. At a stoplight, I call up my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the widow who'd stared into an empty garage. She was something else now, scarred, steady, unbreakable. One evening, I got a letter from my mother, handwritten, the ink shaky as if guilt made her hands tremble. I was wrong about Alice. I see that now. You were right all along. I hope someday you can forgive me for not believing you. I didn't cry this time. I folded the letter neatly and placed it inside Ethan's journal next to his last entry. Some forgiveness doesn't need to be spoken, it just needs to rest somewhere safe. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, the air cool and clean after the rain. The streetlights flickered on, one by one. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked, then quieted. I thought about Alice, her eyes, when the verdict was read, that hollow laughter as the guards took her away. Part of me pitied her, but not enough to wish her freedom. Justice had done what love never could. It drew a line that even blood couldn't cross. I looked up at the stars faint against the Seattle haze, and for the first time in a year, I felt something like gratitude. Not for what I'd lost, but for what had been rebuilt in its place: truth, dignity, peace. When I finally turned off the porch light and went inside, the Mustang keys glinted by the door. I smiled, whispering to the quiet house. "We're home, Ethan. Finally home." And in the silence that followed, it almost felt like he whispered back,